This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com.
Hi, I'm Cindy Harris. Welcome to the Photography Guild.
Welcome to episode number 11 of the Photography Guild. This month we're going to be talking about minimalist photography. Minimalism is a term that's used to describe trends in design, architecture, and of course the visual arts. And I thought it would be fun to play with that with our cameras this month. Now, when we go out to create some minimalist photos, there's some basic principles that we're going to be working with. The less is more concept. We're looking for images that are very uncluttered, but are striking aesthetically, and that bring, if possible, an emotional element of being thought-provoking. So let's break these concepts down a little bit more. The first thing we're going to talk about is removing eye distractions. Now, many times when we look through our viewfinder, we can really get lost in the sea of objects that we're seeing. So it actually is a bit of a challenge when you're doing this type of photography to really try to isolate shapes into their most basic forms. Now, these two photos are kind of interesting. The one on the left was the side of a building, and what I chose to isolate was this singular Christmas light that had a nice contrast against the background. And we're looking at just some very simple lines, very singular shapes. On the photo on the right, this was actually part of a piece of metal sculpture, and what I chose to do was just capture a piece of it, and against that blue sky it almost looks very silhouetted, but at the same time there's very little eye distraction going on, and it makes that sculpture just really be the most prominent thing in the photo. Now, the next thing to think about is to make whatever is in your photo striking. And you can do that in a couple of ways. You can do it with color or with light. Now, the photo on the left, this was actually a little leaf that was between two tree trunks, and the palette was very muted with the grays and the greens, but because of that orange, singular orange leaf, that's what's popping, that's what's making this image striking. Now, the one on the right, I'm using light to help me make it striking. Of course, I have this incredible blue sky that was behind this chain that day, but what I've also used is the shadows and the lights to also bring some interest to just these very simple links of chain. So not only are we trying to isolate images and keep things uncluttered, but we want to try to bring a thought-provoking element to these photos. You know, I think a lot of time as photographers, we're naturally drawn to certain images, and they do create an emotional response in us. And but what's interesting is when you go into the minimalism, you're having to rely on very few elements to create that emotional, thought-provoking response. Now, I thought this photo was a great example of it. Here in the midst of this concrete was this one little flower that was popping up. And it's funny, you could respond to this in a couple of ways. One is, oh my gosh, there's so much cement, there's hardly any flowers. Or you could think, oh my gosh, look at that wonderful flower that is so strong, it came up through this crack in the cement. Well, whichever way you want to play it, it can elicit some sort of thought within you. Now, these next two images I'm showing you because I think it sort of shows how we can go about getting minimalist photographs when we don't live necessarily in a minimalist world. The photo on the left is obviously a series of crosses that I photographed at a World War II cemetery in Holland. And that elicits a response. It's not minimalist, though. But then what I did is I chose to find one cross and focus in on that. I reduced it down to its basic shapes. It's very striking. It's got an interesting play with the light and the shadow. And so you can get a minimalist photo when you are in a very unminimalist environment. Now, another thing you can look for is not just basic shapes, but you can also look for patterns. And what I did in this series of photos is the one on the left, I had the overall brick wall being the pattern with just this single fire bell in the center. And then the photo on the right is actually tire treads off of an old truck. So again, we've reduced it down to some very basic shapes, but instead of it being a singular shape, it's a pattern. And that can also, really create some interesting minimalist photos. Now, the last thing I thought we'd look at is the space around a subject. In this case, I just had an iris that I was photographing, and because I chose to use a very shallow depth of field, the background just washes out, but you get this very clear, striking shape right in the center of the photo. So having the background space around the subject can really help you with minimalism. In this one, I took a tip of a leaf. Again, I went with a shallow depth of field, and not only am I letting the shape of the leaf speak for itself, but I'm looking at the details within the leaf. And again, because it's such a sparse background, it gives this more minimalist view. And then with this last photo, again, the space around the object is what's so minimal. But then what I chose to do on this one is do a very deep depth of field. Everything is in focus, and because of it, it's very sharp, it's very striking. So playing with your depth of field and that space around your object can really help you when you're trying to capture some minimalist photography. So let's talk about the actual physical logistics of accomplishing this. Just a few things. The gear, you can really use any of your lenses. Your standard lens, you can use your zoom and your macro. So you can pretty much go with any lens you've got in your bag. In terms of your settings, you'll probably want to shoot in your AV mode, the aperture value mode. And you're going to want to do that because you're going to want to control your depth of field. You'll want to make a choice. Do I want this shallow depth of field, or I want this to be a deep depth of field? That will help you with the space around your subject. In terms of composition, I found that I was really leading with filling the frame. That was the thing that I wanted the subject that I was choosing to look at to really be the focal point of the photo. And then the other thing is in post, you look at cropping. How you crop things can help you isolate shapes and really help with this type of photography. So the assignment this month is minimalist photography. Go out there and see if you can start to isolate some things in your viewfinder. Like I said, it's a little bit of a challenge when we live in a very uncluttered world, but it is quite rewarding when you get back to your computer and start uploading your images and you see what you've gotten. And as always, don't forget to share your photos. Boy, our Flickr group, we've added more and more members each month. People are just sharing the most amazing photos. So make sure you get a chance to go and check that out on Flickr. And then also, if you need any help uploading your photos, we have a tutorial. You just go to our website and there's a little tutorial. But sharing your photos is a real important part of photography. It's good for you and it inspires others. And next month, we're going to be learning how to take portraits.
For more information on this episode, go to our website and visit the Photography Guild show notes. Also, if you have any questions or ideas, send us an email. Thanks for watching.